How did The Last Dance change your life, or did it?
It didn't change my life. Maybe maybe a handful of people who thought of me as a coach realized that I actually played, so I got some of that. But for the most part, it was mostly just a trip down memory lane and really fun to watch, especially with my kids. They were all toddlers at the time, so it was really fun to watch with them.
You didn't gain any street cred?
I don't know what that means. I mean,
I don't
where
think
would I
people
find out?
I don't think people, you didn't play for 22, 23, 24 years. I don't think people realize you were actually in these games in big ways, like somebody like my son just knows you as the Warriors coach.
There you go.
You're in 2K. It's like there's video Steve Kerr coaching whatever
That's
Steve is.
right.
He had no idea you played. It's like, Steve Kerr played? I'm like, yeah, he won some titles. So from that end, did you learn anything from the doc? Was there anything you didn't know?
Um, there was a lot of stuff that I had just forgotten. I
Mm.
couldn't remember what happened in what year. Like I remember Scotty's injury, um, but I had the details wrong, and I remember Dennis was going off to be in a wrestling match. I forgot that was in the finals. That was
Yes.
insane. Even I was shocked. Like, you
Yeah.
did that in the finals? Yeah. So there was stuff that I hadn't thought about in a long time, but yeah, it was all there, and they did a great job with it. It was a little disappointing that a couple guys, Luke Longley and Ron Harper, didn't get a whole lot of coverage. But you can only do so much, obviously, and Luke lives in remote Western Australia, so I
Right.
don't, I still talk with him. He's still a good friend, and I don't know what the budget was for The Last Dance, but it wasn't big enough to fly to remote Western Australia, I think, and go interview him. But I would have liked to have seen him and Ron get a little more love, just because they were starters and huge players on those teams.
It was a big win for you and I, because I remember one of the first times you came on the podcast, and this was last decade when I was on ESPN, and you did your whole "there will never be another Jordan" thing. And I think it got picked up by news outlets and stuff, where you were just like, it will never happen again. He's the best ever. Like, this guy literally wouldn't let us lose 10 times. You had your whole thing. And as the years pass, everybody just wants whoever the current guy is to be the guy. So there's this whole bit. The cutoff's basically late 20s, I think. Everyone under late 20s is like, no, LeBron's the best ever,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's who they saw. So then The Last Dance gets dropped, and you could kind of feel it, where people are like, oh shit,
yeah.
I didn't wait. He did that. He made the last shot of the finals and then retired. Like, they literally didn't know that stuff, and it's stuff you lived it. I watched it. Like, we just kind of took it for granted. So that was eye opening to me.
You know what I remember that definitely was a good reminder watching The Last Dance was that everybody in the arena was afraid of Michael. Like, he would
Mm,
walk in, and it felt like the other team knew the game was over, and it felt like the fans knew it was over.
yeah.
And that was something I've never felt before or since. I mean, there's obviously guys who garner incredible respect from opponents and from fans and officials, but there was a different aura with Michael, and I think Judd Bushler even said it during the show, during The Last Dance. He had one of the best lines of the whole thing. He said, everybody was afraid of him. He said, fans, the officials, the other team, hell, even we were afraid of him. And I thought it was hilarious, but it was kind of true. Like, Michael just hovered over the proceedings
Yeah.
and was such an alpha that even amongst these incredible athletes in the NBA, it's like nobody really had a chance when he was playing. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. I think I wish they had banged that home a little more, because that's my memory of that team. Like, especially going to see you guys, the 96, 97 range, when you just went from city to city and it was like the fucking Rolling Stones were in town, right? And that's never really happened since. I think Miami for a couple years there, it I don't want to say approached it, but dabbled in it. And I think your team, but the 73 win season, just because people going to watch Curry early, when that started happening, I was like, oh, this reminds me a little of what it was like during the MJ era. And then the 2017 team where it just was like this juggernaut. I just have never had the sensation before and or since of that team coming to your town, and it just felt different. And it was different because of Michael, but it was also like the enduring thing for me was always Michael and Scotty together, where he had just trained. He'd basically willed this other amazing athlete to kind of think and act and do all the things he needed him to do. And they just kind of moved together in this way that was just, I've never seen anything like it. And I don't think that's happened since, where you have these two guys that were like linked like that, and that I thought the doc did a good job of capturing that piece.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Scotty was such a devastating player and devastating force. He was so smart defensively. He was just a genius defensively and guarded everybody and covered up so much of the floor. And he was really our point guard. I mean, he was point forward basically. He
yeah,
was the guy who kind of set the table and got everybody involved. And you're right, the two of them together were athletically were it was just shocking to see that kind of speed and force.